1. This is an incident from when I was 12. I was an average kid doing average stuff. As my religion required, I prayed 5 times a day. We have an early morning prayer that takes place at around 4:30 where people show up at the mosque and we pray together, where a person called the Imam leads the prayer. Now all that aside, here is where things got peculiar. One day I woke up as usual, performed ablution, and set out to the mosque. Upon reaching there, I see that people's shoes are arranged perfectly near the doorstep, which was the first red flag that something was off, as this never happens. People usually just remove their shoes randomly and leave them there in no particular order of neatness. Not thinking much of it at the time, I entered. I didn't notice immediately, but after going and sitting in an empty spot that I spotted in the far corner, I noticed everyone was wearing the same kind of dress, and by that I mean a white robe and white turban. Now that did pique my interest a little bit at the time, but again I didn't pay it much attention. I just sat there waiting for the Imam to begin the prayer, and shortly the Imam got up, started the prayer, and finished like he would every day. Nothing out of the ordinary there. Now here is where logic began to leave me. At the end of our prayer we say a salutation, sort of, by turning our head to the right and then to the left and saying, Assalamu alaikum. And we do that together with the Imam. And I did just that. When I finished turning my head to the left, I looked straight ahead, and much to my surprise I found the space in front of me, where a guy was just praying in front of me just 1 second ago, vacant. And then I started turning my head all the way to the right slowly, and much to my dismay, not a soul was present in the entire goddamn mosque. No Imam, no 50+ people who were present just 1 second ago, praying all together. And slowly the dread started creeping up my spine. I felt the blood drain from my face and my mouth go dry. My mind had never been so blank before, but at that moment, nothing came to my mind. I did the only thing that any normal person would do. I ran. I ran fast and hard, not once looking back at the mosque. I reached home and I immediately started shouting for my parents. My dad, startled awake from his sleep, came running, seeing me panting hard. He asked me what was going on and why I was up so early and why I was panting so hard. After I managed to catch my breath, I explained everything, or at least what came to my mind at that moment. After I finished, I saw his face turn dark. He looked at the clock and looked back at me and said, "It's 3 a.m. right now. What the hell are you talking about?" Overwhelmed by emotions, I broke down and buried my face in his chest and sobbed hard. My mom was there too, and she started comforting me and saying it was just a bad dream. It's all right. It was too much for me to process at the moment. Was I dreaming? Was I hallucinating? I have no idea. All I remember is going back to sleep and waking up 9 o'clock in the morning that day. That's all. I am 18 now, and I still don't know what to make of that incident. My dad still thinks I had one hell of a nightmare, and that's all. But I know what I saw is real as anything can be. It all happened in front of my eyes. The questions I keep asking myself to date are, during the entire ordeal, why didn't I bother even once to check the time? And who were those people? I haven't ever talked about it to anyone since, but today, I thought I'd share it with you guys. Maybe someone out there would understand and know what to make of this incident. 2. So this is one of my more scary experiences, at least for me. So when I was younger, probably 12 or 13, my uncle used to take me places all the time. Mainly because I was the middle child in my family, always left to pick up the slack of everyone else, helping with meals, cleaning, watching my younger siblings, etc. One year he tells me he's going to my great-grandma's lake house in Chesapeake Bay, Virginia for vacation, and to spend some time with her and my great-grandfather. And I am invited. Naturally, I'm like, hell yeah. So we get there, and I think it was the 2nd or 3rd night, and it was storming bad. Pouring rain, lightning that would make it look like daytime for a split second, crackling thunder that would rattle the house, the whole nine. And I love storms, the more intense the better in my opinion. so I was enjoying it. It was just after dinner and I went upstairs to the room I was given to stay in, and I turned the lights off and decided to gaze out the window. I stand there for a couple minutes watching the storm unfold in my great-grandma's backyard. It was a beautiful sight for me, watching the rain fall on the dock, the huge bursts of light, lighting up everything I could see, the roaring thunder. It was awesome. I was there for about 5 minutes before I decided to go back downstairs to see what everyone else was doing. And as I turned away from the window to head that way, a burst of lightning hit, lighting up the room. And there, clear as day, was an old lady standing in the corner of the room, staring at me. She was wearing what I can only describe as a turban on her head, and one of those kinds of dresses that has a nice floral pattern on it, made of regular fabric, but also has an outer layer made of what I assume is like a transparent silk. Needless to say, it scared the shit out of me. I haul ass back downstairs as fast as I can. At the bottom of the steps, I literally run into my uncle. He stops me and says, "Whoa, whoa, what are you running for? You look like you've just seen a ghost." To which I reply, "I did!" And then as I say that, I glance over his shoulder and there she is. The old lady I just saw smiling in a picture framed on the wall, turban and all. I point to it and say, "It was her!" My uncle looks back at the picture and back at me with a scared look and says, "You're fucking with me, right?" I shake my head no and ask who she is. He tells me that was his great-aunt. So my great-great-aunt, also known as Grandma Jones. And that she had died when he was my age. I describe what she was wearing and he gets chills and says those were her favorite kinds of dresses. He then brings me to the kitchen where my great-grandmother is frosting a cake for dessert and says, "Grandma, Caleb just saw Grandma Jones." And she puts down the frosting, looks at us and says, "You know, I always thought that she was still hanging around here. She probably came to you because of your hair. I'm the first redhead in my family in 3 generations. She then tells me that Grandma Jones was also a redhead, and had always taken a liking to anyone else who was as well. Then she shrugs it off and asks if I wanted a piece of cake. Me and my uncle look at each other, and then proceed with dessert, not talking about it for the rest of the trip. Still to this day I think about that and wonder if she's still watching over me. I feel that way because I was told she had very fair skin like us redheads do, and that she died of skin cancer. And I was told by doctors when I was young that if I don't wear sunblock in the sun, then there was a high probability I would develop skin cancer. Maybe those things aren't correlated, but I think they might be. 3. Background. I had always been able to see spirits since I was very young, but I never knew they were spirits because to me they looked just like any other regular person. All the spirits I had seen around had never ever tried to harm me in any way, were very nice and would even check in on me to make sure I was okay when I was really little and couldn't sleep. Meeting a mean or bad entity had never crossed my mind until this experience that I'll explain now. I was about 10 years old when my family and I moved into a brand new house. I actually loved it the first time I went there with my mom to see the house before we bought it, but as soon as we actually moved in, I almost immediately got a feeling that I wasn't at all safe, that I needed to get out of there, but I didn't know why. A few weeks after moving in, my mother decided to go out with her friends one night, leaving my siblings and I alone. We put on our PJs and got in the bed to go to sleep. Unfortunately, I always, since I could remember, had a very difficult time going to sleep. That would always result in everyone always asleep before me, leaving me awake in the pitch-black darkness of the house. I remember specifically that not too long after my siblings went to sleep, I started to hear loud, heavy footsteps up in the attic. Now our bedroom is right near the dining room, the living room, and the front door, so I know if anyone had come in. I was instantly afraid and didn't know what to do. I just tried my best to go to sleep, but the heavy footsteps then made their way down the attic stairs and through the dining room. I felt like I was stuck in a nightmare and couldn't wake up. I tried to wake up my younger siblings, but they were such deep sleepers and didn't budge at all. The footsteps were moving slow and were really heavy and loud, like it was purposely trying to scare me or something. It continued all night, leaving me to not get any sleep in fear that whatever that was would come in our room. Another room in the house that I hated was the basement. I always had a bad feeling whenever I had to go down in the basement. And it's not like it could be avoided either, because of the house. There was only one working bathroom at the time, and that was in the basement. Every time I went down into that basement, I always immediately got the feeling like I'm being watched, which made me constantly look over my shoulder. I remember the first time that I officially started getting the paranormal experience up close and personal. I was sent down into the basement to put the wet clothes that had just been washed in the washing machine in the dryer. I, as always, went down there extremely reluctantly, but just decided that if I did it fast enough, I could hurry up and get back upstairs, where everyone else was, before it got too scary. So I started putting the clothes in the dryer while frequently looking over my shoulder because of that creepy feeling. But I was alone. No one was there. I started to go a little faster, getting more scared of being down there by myself. But only about a minute later did I feel a finger poke my back, making me jump, scream, and turn around. I thought it had been my siblings trying to scare me, but I called their names before checking the whole basement, only to find out that I was completely alone. Feeling my blood run cold in fear, I ran back into the laundry room to finish putting the last few pieces of clothing in the dryer, and that's when I felt 2 more pokes, which were now hard jabs in my back. I had never been so scared in my life. I finally slammed the dryer door shut, started it up, and raced back up the stairs. When we got older, we all stopped sharing a room and got our own. Mine was unfortunately right by the basement. That's when all the paranormal stuff started to get worse. It seemed. I started to get the same nightmares of being raped, kidnapped, or murdered in some type of way every night. And when I would wake up from the dream, I would wake up just to find out that I was in some sort of sleep paralysis state. One particular night I woke up in the middle of the night in that state, and during that period I couldn't move anything except my eyes. That alone scared me, but what made it worse was the fact that I could hear a terrifying growling sound right next to me, like it was coming from a human but more animalistic, and the sound would come closer and closer. I'd want to scream or do anything, but I couldn't. I was just stuck. But I would continue to try to move. Something like blinking, or move my toes or fingers, which would, if I could do it fast enough, before whatever that thing was could get to me, break the paralysis I was in. Eventually I did, and once I was out of the sleep paralysis, I quickly hopped out of my bed to find that nothing was in my room. I was confused and thought that maybe I was just half asleep or something, and I was unknowingly having a dream. I adopted that explanation and just tried to brush it off and went back to sleep. It wasn't until this one crazy nightmare of a night alone that I had in that house, when I really understood how bad this entity's intention was. I was home completely alone. At this time, I had gotten used to the small incidents like the walking, touching, and weird sounds, etc. But anywho, I personally checked to make sure that the house was secure before I tried going to sleep. After trying to get comfortable, I attempted to go to sleep. I heard the usual footsteps, but like I said, at this point it didn't bother me as much, and ended up, unusually, falling asleep really fast. I ended up having a brutal nightmare about being raped, causing me to jolt awake. When I woke up in the middle of the night, I was shivering because of how cold I was. But the reason why I was cold was because, somehow, I was completely naked. I had never in my life as a girl felt comfortable to sleep naked, especially in that house. Plus, it was the winter time, so I went to sleep in really heavy sweatpants that were in a really tight knot that I couldn't even take out. So long story short, you'd have to really struggle to take these pants off of me. The cover had been taken off me and neatly folded at the edge of my bed, and the light had been turned on. Immediately thought the worst. Maybe someone had gotten in. I got up, slipped on some pajamas, and checked the whole house, including the attic. Everything was just as secure as I left them before I went to sleep. There weren't any signs that anyone has tried to get in, and I was still home alone. Realizing this, I was making my way up the stairs from the basement when I heard footsteps coming up behind me. and before I could completely turn around to see who it was, I felt 2 hands shove me hard on the stairs, making me slip. But luckily I caught myself before I went tumbling down. My heart was pounding, and I wanted to desperately run out of that house. And even though everything in my body was telling me not to, I turned around, went back down the stairs into the basement to check to see if anyone was there. But there was no one. I was still alone. I quickly went up the stairs, holding onto the railing this time, and practically barricaded myself into my room until my mom and siblings came back home, which was the next morning. It seemed to only get worse, like whatever that spirit was really targeting me. Like bruises would randomly appear in my body for no reason at all. And only me. Like my mom and siblings have never been attacked or harmed by the entity in that house. I would just be sitting, watching TV, when I would feel a burning sensation somewhere on my skin and find random burn marks. I have a whole bunch of other experiences with this particular entity in this house that I won't say because it'll make this too long. But now I just turned 18 years old and I didn't accept my purpose. I was fearful, doubtful, etc., which added to the negative. Live in a much better and safer environment with my grandmother. I still see and now work with spirits daily, helping them move on, or, if they want to help me with something, under the guidance and wisdom of my grandmother, who was also a medium as well. But to whatever entity that was targeting me in that house, I hope to never ever meet you, ever again. 4. So my aunt died at the end of this August, and I was very close with her. I saw her at least 2 or 3 times a week. She wasn't my blood aunt, but her mother and my grandmother were neighbors before my grandma had children. My dad and the rest of his family considered her their aunt because of how close my family was with hers. She was about 20 living with her mother when my grandma was about 25 and newly married. My aunt has been around since then, and once my dad and his siblings grew up, we and the rest of my cousins became her nieces and nephews. For some reason, my family was the closest to her compared to my aunt and uncle's children. We have went on holidays with her before, and she was honestly my favorite relative I've ever had. Anyways, she got diagnosed a year prior to her death with stage 4 cancer again. She had beaten this cancer a couple times before, but it had came back again. Even after she got diagnosed again, she still kept coming to my hockey and lacrosse games, and still managed to see us at least 2 times a week. Last January she got worse and stopped coming to visit us, and I found out that she was in the hospital most of the time with really extreme chemotherapy sessions. She lost all of her hair and about 80 pounds. I only got to see her a couple of times over that summer because of how busy we were, and she was very self-conscious and worried she would scare my little sister with what she looked like and sounded like now. We managed to see her a couple times, and she was just going straight downhill. About a week before she passed away, we went up to our cabin for a week, where we have no cellular service. At this time we had no clue that her cancer was this bad. I felt some sort of odd presence almost the whole time we were up, but thought that it was just me being weird for not being able to text my friends. But about halfway through the week I went over to my friend's cabin who has Wi-Fi and went to check my Instagram. I saw that her daughter had made a post about how my aunt had died the other day, and I was just shocked. It was late at night and my parents were already asleep, so I couldn't really tell anyone except that one friend I was with. The weird thing was that I felt an even stronger presence that day and thought that maybe I ate something funny. The next day I watched them, numb, not knowing what to do. We ended up driving over to that same friend's house to call her daughter to find out what had happened, because we all thought she was doing better. When we got a hold of her daughter, she told us how she had been trying to call us all week to come visit my aunt and say our goodbyes. This really upset my family because the day she had first called us was the first day we had got up there, and so we had no way of knowing what was going on. We had her funeral exactly a week and a day before my birthday in September. As soon as I walked into the funeral, I felt a very intense presence, and felt like I was getting hugged from behind very, very tight. I knew it was my aunt, and I told her that she needed to stay with her daughter and husband and watch over them because of how terrible her family was doing then. I didn't feel her at all except one time in the end of December. Until today at school. I was in second last block about halfway through when I felt like there was a hand on the back of my head. When I turned around to see who it was, there was no one there. So I continued working and then felt like my head was being hugged from behind. I turned around again, no one there. My brain wasn't processing what was going on until my breathing started to get a bit funny and different. I realized a spirit was around me, and so I said under my breath so the other students couldn't hear me, "If this is my aunt, put your hand on my right cheek." After I said that, I felt a pressure on my right cheek almost immediately. I knew this was my aunt once more and couldn't believe she was back. I know this must sound ridiculous and crazy, but I told her that we all missed her and think about her all the time, and that we have been visiting her family and have been keeping an eye on them and helping them out whenever they needed. I could feel her presence in that same hug around my head from the back. It feels like the back of my head is on her chest with her arms around the front of my face, the whole time that I talked to her. After class was over, I could still feel her on me, and while walking in the hallway of the school before the next block, I felt extreme emotions of horror and sadness. I almost started to cry, which really weirded me out because I haven't cried since I was literally 10. I am 16 now, and literally no matter what happens, I can't physically cry or show much emotion at all. I texted my mother to tell her that something was going on, and I wasn't really sure how to explain it. The whole next block I am literally shaking and completely wide-eyed, not knowing what is happening to me at all. About halfway through the class, my mom calls me, so I excuse myself to go answer the call. I barely say hi to her before I burst into tears I can't control. I have no clue why I was crying either. It was very strange for me because I literally haven't shed a single tear since I was 10. I told her what happened and we talked about it for 8 minutes before I was completely fine again and didn't feel any sadness or horror at all. I ended the call and went back to class to try and finish an essay I was working on. As I'm typing this, I still feel like my aunt is hugging my head. But I don't have any more of those extreme emotions of sadness or dread. Thanks for listening. Just really needed to get that off my chest. 5. First, I need to give you a little description of the area in our kitchen in which this event takes place. The south center of the kitchen is short and sits to the west and shares the same walls as our pantry, which is why that counter is short. On the counter next to the wall shared with the pantry is our microwave, a fairly big one, that comes nearly to the edge of the counter. To the right of the microwave is our toaster oven, which sits farther back on the counter. To the right of that sits our toaster, and then the counter makes a 90-degree turn, and that part of the counter is unimportant for this incident. One hot summer day, I was preparing a microwave meal in front of the toaster oven. I popped it into the microwave, and when I was done, I took it into the bedroom so I could eat it in front of the fan to stay cool. Just as I entered the bedroom, my husband went into the kitchen to make a brew. Not 3 seconds later, he came to the door of the bedroom, holding a half-full gallon jug of milk. "Did you leave this on the counter?" he asked. "No, I don't drink milk," I replied. "We always only buy 1 gallon of milk at a time because he likes it in his coffee." I thought I must have left it out the last time I used it, but when I checked the fridge, our milk was already in there. "And listen to this," he said, as he shook the jug of milk. It was clumpy and rattling against the sides of the jug like it had been sitting out in the hot weather for a couple of days. There was simply no time for someone to have quietly snuck into our kitchen and placed that spoiled jug of milk exactly where I had just been preparing a microwave meal, and the time it took my husband to go to the kitchen. We have had other objects appear in our house, but never so blatantly. Both my husband and I are tuned into the other world, and I will share more stories another time. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 145. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use and sent in stories for use in this video. We human beings are silly creatures of habit, we really are. It's like, take me for example. I'd taken to, for a while, whenever I'd be working and I'd feel tired, which would become ever more and more frequently, grabbing a can of Red Bull or something, or Rockstar, or whatever you have, to give me a little jolt to keep me going, when in fact I knew I would be better served by taking a little bit longer time, not much longer, and just making a smoothie. I've got a really good blender. I've got the supplies to make the smoothie there, plenty of frozen fruit and the like in the freezer, which I bought for just that purpose. But I would always, out of habit, just grab the energy drink. So lately I've been forcing myself, when I feel that way, when I get tired working, to make the smoothie instead, which has a much more positive result on me, to be honest with you. You don't really get, when you drink a smoothie, you do get a little bit of an energy jolt, but you don't get the crash later you do when you drink energy drinks. Plus, you get the benefits of all the vitamins and so forth. Of course, that's not to say I'm giving up energy drinks entirely, but it does give me an excuse and motivation to cut back down. Be healthier. Gradually, I was kind of pushing myself back towards getting healthier. Then I was sick for about a month with various things, just flu or whatever it was. And when you feel that way, you just want things that are going to comfort you. And the things that comfort you aren't always the things that are necessarily best for you, the things that are healthy for you. So we are now back to being healthy freezer. Hopefully. It does remind me, though, I'll need to get more raw honey because the big jar I had, I'm almost out. Okay, and with that, I'm off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.